ครับผมสวัสดีครับผมดร.ณัฐวุฒิกุลนิเทศนะครับวันนี้ได้โอกาสพิเศษนะครับได้กลับมาคุยกับทุกท่านนะครับในวันซึ่งอากาศค่อนข้างที่จะฝนตกพอสมควรนะครับก็เอาใจช่วยทุกท่านนะครับแล้วก็รวมถึงข่าวน้ำท่วมซึ่งเราก็ได้ยินมาในสักพักหนึ่งแล้วเหมือนกันนะครับแต่วันนี้เนี่ยเรื่องธุรกิจก็ต้องดำเนินต่อไปนะครับแล้วก็วันนี้เราได้แขกรับเชิญพิเศษนะครับซึ่งท่านเองก็เป็นผู้ซึ่งทำงานอยู่ในแวดวงที่ปรึกษามานะครับตอนนี้เป็น Managing Director ของทางด้าน RBL Asia นะครับหลายท่านอาจจะไม่รู้จักว่า RBL คือใครนะครับแต่ถ้าเราพูดถึง Founder ของ RBL คือคุณเดฟออริชนะครับซึ่งก็ที่เมืองไทยรู้จักแกเป็นอย่างดีนะครับอีกท่านหนึ่งก็คือคุณนอมสมอลวูดนะครับซึ่ง2 อาทิตย์ที่แล้วก็มีโอกาสมาเล่าให้เราฟังนะครับว่าองค์กรในสภาวะปัจจุบันนะครับจะต้องปรับตัวยังไงนะครับแล้วก็จะต้องมีการประเมินตัวเองยังไงนะครับเพื่อที่จะไปต่อนะครับสู้โควิดฝ่าฟันไปด้วยกันนะครับวันนี้ท็อปิกที่เราจะคุยกันนะครับเป็นชื่อที่เราเรียกว่า Reinventing the Organization นะครับซึ่งจริงๆแล้วมาจากหนังสือเล่มใหม่ของเดฟออริชนะครับแล้วก็อาร์เธอร์ยุนนะครับซึ่งก็ได้ Harvard Business Press นะครับเป็นคนพิมพ์นะฮะหนังสือเล่มนี้นะครับก็จริงๆที่มาที่ไปมันเป็นคำถามง่ายๆนะครับว่าทำไมองค์กรบางองค์กรเนี่ยปรับตัวได้ค่อนข้างดีนะครับไม่ว่าจะเกิดวิกฤตไม่ว่าจะมีเทคโนโลยี disruption ขึ้นมานะครับแต่ดูเหมือนว่าองค์กรเนี่ยมีความสามารถในการที่จะปรับตัวไปได้ค่อนข้างดีนะครับแต่ในบางองค์กรเนี่ยไม่สามารถปรับตัวได้นะครับเกิดวิกฤตเกิดขึ้นปุ๊บบริษัทเองก็มีทีท่าจะครับวันนี้เราจะได้Managing Director นะครับของ RBL Asia นะครับมิสเตอร์ Darryl Wee นะครับเดี๋ยวผมจะขออนุญาตแนะนำ Darryl เป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับแล้วก็จะให้ Darryl เขาพูดให้เราฟังนะครับFor our special guest speaker today we got Darryl Wee who is Managing Director of RBL Asia. Darryl is totally in love with Thailand. You know, he's always. I'm sure you feel the pain right now.That you cannot travel and play golf in Bangkok. But with that fact, it also means that Darryl has worked with a lot of clients in Thailand. So he's know pretty well what is cultures and beyond the text and words, right? That means that he know how to put the Asian Pacific context, and Thailand context, into more like international concept. Okay.So with today, Darryl gonna go through and introduce the concept of reinventing the organization for us, which a special privilege for all of us, with a good support from Thai listed company associations, and with our platform Home Yai Thai Business. Without any further ado, Darryl.Welcome to the platform and thank you so much for your contributions. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Sawadee-krap, everybody. It's nice to see all of you again. It's a rainy day in Thailand, but it's also a rainy day for us in Singapore. So if we can just go to the presentation, let me just jump straight into this, as we actually have a lot to cover and not much time. So can we have the presentation, please?As we're getting the presentation ready, let me give you a little bit of context. When Dave and Arthur started to look at the book and started to design the concept around the book, the question was always, what are new emerging companies doing that are helping them deliver such amazing results and deliver such return for their stakeholders?And what they started to look at, interestingly, was what are the new economy companies in China and what are the new economy companies in the US? And are there any commonalities or are there any differences? And what they discovered was that there were a number of different elements that enables the organization to operate very differently from a traditional organization. So if you go to the next slide and we take a quick look at the objective.Next slide, please. Thank you. I want to just share with you quickly what are some of the key findings from the study, but I really want to jump into the framework. And I think the framework is where it's interesting and where you can get some insights. and thoughts, and then give you some ideas. How do you diagnose gaps moving forward and determine a way forward? Next slide, please. So this is going to be the overview, and traditionally when we talk about growing pains to slowing pains. I think we want to be able to add also the impact of COVID, because the impact of COVID now actually makes this work and this book so much more relevant. Conceptually, in the past, we were looking at disruption purely from technology and how does that impact business models. What we are looking now at is not only the impact of technology, but is the impact of the pandemic, because that's forcing all businesses to relook at themselves. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So if you look at in 2018, I mean, this is when they started looking at it, and we're now 2020. If you look at the most valuable companies by market cap, you have, these are what you see. You see Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, and Exxon. But I want you to compare this with the next slide. Next slide, please. If you think about valuable companies in 2013, take a look, right? Apple, Exxon, and take a look at the list of those companies. And the question around when you're comparing the most valuable companies in 2013 and 2015, two things are very different. One is the size and the market cap, and the other is the type of companies. If you go to the next slide, please. If you go back a little bit more, right? Take a look at 20 years back, right? And you take a look at those type of companies. The companies are totally different. Market cap is totally different. So the question is, what's changing? What's impacting the market cap? And what's impacting the type of different companies? If you just go to the next slide. So here's a slide that basically puts everybody together. And if you can see, there are actually only a few companies that have been able to stay in the list from 1998 to 2018, okay? And what's interesting is over the 20-year summary, there's exponential growth in the market. We have completely seen traditional industries shift, and there is a rise of the new economy. So the question around the book is, what are new economy companies doing that traditional economies don't do? If you go to the next slide. So, when we look at the S&P and we look at, in 1958, how long does the average company stay in the S&P? And in 1958, it was 61 years. So if you're a great company and you make it to the S&P, your ability to stay up there, will keep you there on average 61 years. Today, it takes companies change every 18 years. And when we look at the S&P 500, and you compare it backwards, what we're beginning to see is there's an aspect that just because you're a good company and you're on the S&P 500, your likelihood of staying there now is not 61 years, it's not 18 years. And I think the current estimate is if you're good, you can stay there for 8 years or more, okay? And you take a look at the list of companies on the right side. These are amazing companies, right? Compaq, Digital Equipment, Philip Morris, Woolworths, Enron. Okay, Enron had their issues. Gillette. Okay, so they're not small companies. The question is, why did these companies slowly disappear? Of course, some were acquired, some exploded. But just because you are successful now does not guarantee you to be successful moving forward. And I'm saying this to the Thai Listed Companies Association very carefully, because we put in a lot of effort to get into the stock exchange. We put in a lot of effort to manage our governance and build strategy to be successful. But what the data is suggesting is that it takes more than just doing what you're doing to get into the exchange and to be successful, to be able to continue being successful moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay. We were looking then at the impact of COVID, and let's look at Thailand. I'm sure you guys have seen this and are much more aware of this. but GDP expectation to contract by 5%. Exports are going to drop. Job losses are definitely there. Thailand is driven to a certain extent by tourism, and with travel bans, no one can come out of Thailand. We continue to have issues in the political climate, right? All of these factors really impact how you as organizations operate within the market. Next slide, please. So the big question for us is, where are we now in our business life cycle? And this is the traditional business life cycle. And if you go right smack in the middle and it's in blue and you see a disruption with a yellow circle, when disruptions occur, two things happen. There's forced reinvention. Okay, if you don't reinvent or you don't reinvent correctly, what happens is that a company begins to decline. Okay, if you do it right, you begin to revive. I think COVID is forcing us as not so much as technology. Technology definitely has an impact, but COVID is definitely impacting us right now to figure out how are we going to operate. I was speaking to a chairman this morning at breakfast, and we were talking about he's chairman of a board of a publicly listed company, and his issue is this: when COVID hit, their traditional business basically disappeared because it was associated with airports. But they were able to quickly find a new business to replace it with all of the work around quarantines. But what's going to end up happening is, by the time markets begin to open, Singapore begins to open up, and we change our COVID quarantine practices, suddenly that quarantine business is going to go away, and the airport business hasn't come back because no one's allowed to travel just yet. So how is that going to impact your organization? If you don't use this time to reconsider and reinvent, it's a wasted opportunity. So next slide. If you are going to look now in the next 5 years and assume all of these changes that are happening, disruption with technology, changing consumer trends, impact of pandemics, changing politics, the question is, if you keep operating the same way as you've been operating today, where are you going to be in 5 years from now? Will you end up in revival, or will you end up in decline? Okay. What we're hoping to do is, by giving you some of the concepts from the lessons that we've learned from these top companies, we're giving you tools to be able to relook at the organization in a little bit of a different way. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the new economy companies that we studied. Alibaba, Amazon, Didi, Facebook, Google, Tencent, Huawei, Supercell. And we didn't try to go to everyone. I mean, we went to all of these, and obviously we could have done more. But if you can see, it's a very nice mix of, if you're talking about the bifurcation of technology, we have both American and China firms. So we looked at these, and we basically said, what are these guys doing that are different from traditional companies? Next slide. Next slide, please. So the framework. The framework for reinvention is basically 6 key elements, okay? And in the 6 key elements, what we are looking at is split into 3 main topic areas. The first topic area is around content. And in content, we look at 2 things: the environment and the strategy. In the form, we look at capabilities and morphology. And morphology around organizational structures is where a lot of people are very interested in the work and the thinking that has come out from the book. The last part is impact, right? And impact is really about, once you understand capabilities and morphology, what type of governance do you need to be able to put into the organization, and what type of leadership do you need to have in the organization to be able to make sure this works? I must say right now, we're not suggesting that you replace your current structure and your organization with what's suggested here. What you need to do is look at your business, look at what makes the most amount of sense for you to decide what are you going to apply and what are you not going to apply. Okay, next slide. So in terms of the framework, we're going to look at the context. So the next slide, please. Understanding the context is the first part. And there are 2 things that we do in terms of understanding the context. Do we understand and anticipate changing environmental conditions that will shape our future? And does the organization have a clear strategy for growth and pathways for making that happen? Okay, next slide. So there's two things. We looked at the environment and we look at strategy. Next slide, please. If we look at the environment, next slide. Here's a perfect example of Blockbuster. Blockbuster used to be everywhere for those of us who are old enough to remember rental videos, right? And what's interesting with Blockbuster is that one of Blockbuster's partners was a company called Netflix, right? And I'm sure you guys are familiar with Netflix. And what Netflix did for Blockbuster was they were the logistics arms for Blockbuster. They were actually the organization that was sending out the CDs for home delivery. What Netflix began to realize was that as formats began to change for videos, they said eventually it's going to go onto a laptop. They were already seeing it with music. So they basically said to Blockbuster, would you like to work with us? We want to create a new way to distribute movies, right? And Blockbuster said to them, no, thank you. You know, our current model is working very well. We do see online coming along, but we don't think it will impact us anytime soon. So Netflix continued to do the business, but Netflix basically shifted its model, and look at Netflix now, right? Netflix even more during the pandemic solidified its position, because how many people actually pay for cable TV and watch free-to-air TV channels now, right? We look at consumer behavior in Asia, and the vast majority of younger people are watching Netflix, Amazon Prime, or they're going for on-demand video services. Cable TV and normal TV services are a really hard place to be in right now. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what I'm trying to get at is demonstrated by this bridge. Okay, and the analogy is very simple. We can design a well hurricane-proof structure, and this was actually a bridge that was linking one side of the river to the other side, and this was a critical bridge because it connected two towns. And after this bridge was built, they used to have ferries to bring goods between the two towns, and the two towns invested in this bridge. But this bridge became worthless when the environments changed, right? What happened was there was a large hurricane. Hurricane came through, and within one day, the river that used to go under the bridge completely changed, and the embankments completely moved because of the hurricane. What we're saying is that COVID is one of these hurricanes. Technology is a hurricane, right? The question is this: you may have a wonderful business model, and it may be working for you now, but when the environment shifts with a major change, are you going to be stuck like this bridge, having a wonderful business model, but now no longer being able to serve a purpose? Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So we can see the impact of technology, and we can see the impact of COVID and the changes of consumer behavior and expectations going to impact us across all of these industries. And here's a slide basically saying, look, the internet is really impacting postal services. Cloud computing is impacting routers and servers. So here are just some examples. By the way, we have a copy of this presentation for you in PDF, which we're happy to share. So you don't have to worry about taking too many notes. Next slide, please. Okay, so so that's around the environment. So the critical thing around the environment is how good are we as an organization to be able to understand trends, to figure that out, and be prepared for the trends that potentially may impact us, understand the implications, and start thinking about how do we respond to that over time. The next slide, and this slide, is about how do people think about strategy then? And these are all of the buzzwords associated with strategy. Okay, next slide, please. When we look at strategy, we basically see strategy having 4 different types of maturity levels. Okay. And the first level of maturity is basically organizations that do planning, 1 to 3 year plans or 5-year plans. We do SWOT analysis. We have a budget. Therefore, this budget is supposed to be able to do this year, and we'll look at it moving forward over a rolling period perspective. That's much more of a planning approach to strategy. The second level of that, and planning does need to exist, right? But the next level beyond planning is alignment. Okay, let me diagnose what's working and what's not working. Let me align my systems and let me begin to understand what's happening on the outside and how does that impact us, so that we have a higher probability to be able to execute the strategy and be supported by all of those planning processes. Okay. The third phase is a really capability-driven approach. And the capability approach is very fundamental in looking at, 1, what's our organizational strategy? 2, do we have the organizational capabilities, not people competencies, but organizational capabilities that delivers on our strategy and increases the likelihood of us meeting our customer value proposition and us differentiating ourselves from the competition. The third level has been where we've been in RBL doing a lot of work. And we do this for a number of different organizations globally and in Asia. What we're beginning to find now is the fourth level. And this is the fourth level that we are now testing and working with organizations. Do we have a strategy that enables us to disrupt, reinvent, and build much more of an ecosystem culture? And we have heard the comments about building an ecosystem relationship across the organization and outside the organization. But that's just building the relationship. How do we create a strategy that is nimble and is able to pivot and reinvent itself in a way that enables us to meet the changing demands, but in a way that doesn't unsettle the rest of the organization because we're changing our minds every year? Okay, so there must be a balance because you need each of the different levels, but you also now what we're seeing is that you need a different level of ability for the organization to start to shift and to adjust. Okay. Next slide, please. So here's a quick assessment for you, and you don't have to do it. This will be in your slides, but my question for you would be, honestly rate yourself. For environment and strategy, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 is you're doing this perfectly and you meet all of the descriptors in blue on top. If you are not, let's see where you are. The point of the assessment is like going to do your annual checkup, right? By going to do your annual physical checkup, you know from your body's perspective what's working and what's not working, and you know what you need to do to be able to become healthy. This is the same thing. This is an organizational checkup in terms of where does this fit. Okay, next slide, please. The new organizational form is the next thing. Next slide, please. Right? And in this space, and this is where I'll probably spend a little bit more time than the other sections, is really form is around capabilities, and second one is around morphology. And do we have defined and articulated critical capabilities in executing our growth strategy throughout our firm, okay, and ecosystem? The second one is really around have we designed the right organizational form and structure to enable our growth? So what we want to be able to share with you is what we found specifically in these companies in these two areas, because this is where we see these companies doing something a little bit different. Next slide, please. Okay. And these are the two things. I'll talk to you about the 4 capabilities that was consistent across all of these 8 companies. And I'll also talk to you about the type of morphology or structure that they put into place that enable them to operate that way. Okay. Next slide, please. What we were able to do with our analysis was when we did the interviews with these companies, we basically gave them a list of, here are all the capabilities. Can you analyze these capabilities on two axes? One, effectiveness, and the second one around business impact. And that's a lot of the work that we do today. We're looking at how effective you are and how much these capabilities actually make a difference for your business in delivering stakeholder results. And we discovered really interesting things. Obviously, on the top right is where you want to be, right? You want to be able to have great capabilities, you're highly effective, and at the same time, it has great business results. But the way we looked at it was, what were the capabilities that actually had the most impact for the business, and where did they sit? And we found 4 capabilities. We found one around customer obsession across these organizations that was both highly effective and had great impact. But we found 3 capabilities that was consistent across these organizations, and it was innovation, agility, and external sensing, that they said, we don't do this very well, but boy, if we do this better, this is going to make a significant difference in the way we operate and our level of success. So imagine if these companies are saying that they aren't that good in this, imagine where some of our traditional companies could be at. Next slide, please. What we wanted to share with you is that as an organization, you don't have to try to be great at all of these, because it doesn't make sense. It's impossible for you to be good at everything. It really does depend on your strategy. What's your strategy? How are you going to win? And which one of these capabilities is going to make the most amount of difference? And what we found was external sensing was consistent with everybody. They want to be good at understanding what opportunities were there so that they could take advantage of that. That was a key focus. But the other 3 capabilities was really around innovation, agility, and customer obsession. Okay? And here is a slide that basically just shows you, for each of these companies that we looked at, what were their ratings, where were they high strength, where were they medium strength, and where were they a little bit of a lower strength. Okay? So what I thought we would do is, I thought it would be useful to show you a quick video. Let's hope the video works. And this is Dave talking a little bit about the organization. Okay, so could you just show the video, please? You can play the video in the presentation mode.
Okay, let's hope the video work.
Right, and they have to turn up the volume.
Yeah, and yeah, you need to make sure that you allow the sound, the clip sound, to be broadcast. Well, all right. Maybe why the team is trying to figure out. Maybe can I ask for Darryl observation as well? I think it's great to hear all the great company. That it seems like they know the magic formula, isn't it? From hopping from one S curve to another S curve. But for just the average organizations, what is your recommendations in terms of how to what is a simple step? Maybe for organization to self-assess their situations, why they can learn from the leading organization like this. What will be your recommendations?
Right. So let me answer this, and at the same time tell the guys at the back, if the video doesn't work, it's no problem. We can keep going. But the organizations in general, my recommendation is this. Be 2 things. First, understand how this pandemic is really going to impact your business moving forward, right? How is this going to change your consumer trends or your customer expectations of you? How are you going to operate with them? How is this going to also impact your workforce? What is this going to change in the ways of working, right?
Mhm.
And then by understanding that, okay, let's build a plan to be able to work towards being able to meet P&L cash flow requirements to shareholders. But then let's look at using this opportunity to build the type of organization, the type of workforce, to look at the strategy that will make you successful moving forward. My greatest fear for leaders during this time is they are so busy firefighting, right? Trying to survive, and that's important. But this is also a significant opportunity for reinvention. Right? And my recommendation is to take a step, and even if it's only for a day, to breathe and to pull your leadership team back and say, guys, let's just stop for a minute because we can afford one day. Let's look forward. How do we prepare for the organization moving forward, right? And that would be my recommendation. And what I would like to offer is we have the assessment in the slide deck. Feel free to use the assessment so that you can use that as a starting point.
Okay, thank you. If the clip is ready, you can run the clip,ครับ.
I tell you what, let's not waste time. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
All right. And in the next slide, what Dave is basically saying in his presentation, which is very funny, is that organizations, when they look at strategy, they fundamentally fall back when working with consultants to two fundamental types, right? Are we going to be, right now, the new leader thinks, hey, I need to push control closer to my people who make the business decisions because they're closer to customers. Let's decentralize, right? And let's decentralize this way. Then suddenly, when things don't begin to work or a new CEO comes in, then what you hear is the other approach. Oh, we're too decentralized. There's not enough control. We are not taking advantage of economies of scale. Let's centralize again, right? And as we start to centralize, that changes. And Dave's comment is, this is great work for these type of consultants, right? You changing business models, you changing structures all of the time without realizing, or sometimes without having a strong link back to strategy. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it fits your needs. But what we're seeing in the new type of economies, these type of companies have a completely different type of structure that may apply for some of the work that you need to do. And the structure is basically this. They have a platform and they have cells. And this is, for some of you who will go, yeah, I read about this before, that's part, this only works for new technology companies, but it's very interesting. Even at RBL, we have started to switch and we're operating this way already as a consulting firm, which is quite interesting because we're practicing what we preach, right? The platform has moved from the headquarters and all of the corporate functions. We're now saying it sits in the middle. And your role in the middle is to support the cells. And who are the cells? The cells are people who have a responsibility for specific business outcomes, right? And in these cells are independent. They make their own decisions. They manage their own strategy and talent, okay? This actually, I believe, this type of structure would work very well for many Thai conglomerates, right? Where mothership provides funding, provides a certain amount of decision-making and support. Then they set up businesses to go after different types of opportunities. The other critical thing with the cells is the strategic partners and allies. Because what we're seeing is that the companies that go out as business cells, they're not trying to do everything. They're saying, look, my skill set is being able to bring this product quickly to market. My skill set isn't trying to do all of the marketing myself. Let me go partner with a specialist in marketing. Let me go partner with somebody who's a specialist in app design to do this app for us, right? The other thing is that the platform basically shares corporate resources. They share common needs. They facilitate cross-network learning. So this is where the ecosystem word comes in. By having the separate cells and having the platform, traditionally where this has failed is, number one, the cell owners don't talk to one another. And what we found in Tencent and what we found in Alibaba was that the CEOs of those businesses actually spend a lot of time regularly with one another to share learnings on technology, to share learnings on customer, to share learnings on innovation, and to share learning around agile processes. Okay, that's the difference. They're building an ecosystem. I'm not just giving you money and you go operate and you are completely independent. What they do try to pull back is the continual sharing across the ecosystem. So if you go to the next slide, to reinvent, you have an opportunity to look at your hierarchy and say, look, traditional businesses may have a control hierarchy, and this works very well, but the limit is about 200 people, right? 200 people, because this control-oriented hierarchy was created in the military to fight and operate against the enemy. What happens is that organizations now take this hierarchy and make it massive. So you have 20, 30,000 people now operating in this hierarchy, or even 1,000 or 2,000 people. It doesn't help because information doesn't go up and down smoothly or across smoothly. And to help that, what do organizations try to do? They try to build a matrix organization and makes it even more difficult, right? So what we're beginning to see is, look, in a market-oriented ecosystem, individual cells have the ability to respond much faster to the market. The platform keeps everybody operating together in the same way. So we still have one view of finance. We still have talent development. We still have all of these type of things happening. And by being able to build much more of an ecosystem approach where they're working with other parties and allies and sharing information across, we have seen situations where one cell is dealing with innovation and they're doing something really unique. And another cell said, hey, I'm just starting that. What can I do to learn from you and leverage and bring it across? And they've been able to accelerate that process in the other business significantly faster than if they were to do it alone. That's where the ecosystem needs to operate within the organization. Next slide, please. So the best example that we have for this is Supercell. Supercell, I'm not sure if you know, was founded in 2010, and they are an online and mobile gaming organization, right? The reason why they call themselves Supercell is because they are super and have a common shared platform, and they have cells in which the super platform is supposed to help the different cells. And the interesting thing is, they have a philosophy: the best games are developed by the best talent. They only have 200 people in the organization, and their estimated worth is over $200 billion. So each employee is effectively contributing $1 billion worth of value in the organization. Every year since they've launched, they have at least one hit game, okay, that takes the market by storm. All right. So if you go to the next slide, what they do is they have inverted the triangle. The CEO doesn't sit at the top. The CEO sits at the bottom. The leaders now support the teams, right? And you could almost look at this and say, isn't that the same as servant leadership? And to a certain extent, it is, because the principles are there to serve the larger group. But the difference is that in each cell, okay, the decision-making is done at the cell level, which means the cell decides what games to develop is not decided at corporate, okay? Each cell decides how do they use resources, okay? So a very simple example in this case was the organization. What they normally do is they share the latest games with each other, okay, before it goes to market. So everybody gets a chance to play and everybody gives feedback. One cell shared their game with all of the other cells. And what the other cells did was the other cell says, hey, I think you need to improve here. I think you need to improve there. But all of the other cells saw that this game was going to be amazing. So what the other cells did was they stopped their own development and they contributed their time and effort to help this cell improve their experience, and they went to market first. Okay? The game went to market, it became a huge success. All right? Next slide, please. So creating a platform and having supersized cells, if you can see, what they do is the platform provides marketing, operations, and functional support like HR so that the cells can focus on the job, right? They hire the right people for the platform. For example, they had 2 positions open for graphic designers, right? What was it? I think it was over 200,000 people applied for the job because they wanted desperately to work in this organization. So they're highly selective in hiring people and for the platforms. And what they try to do is they don't try to do everything themselves. They leverage it with external partners. Okay, next slide. So this slide just tries to share with you at the platform level, what's the core activity? What are some of the examples? At the cell level and at the partner and ally level, what are some of the different things? Okay, just so that you know, what Tencent does is the reason we know so much about this is Arthur, when he was working as the senior advisor in Tencent, his job was to make sure all of the CEOs work together in the network. So he built the processes, he built the methodology to force the CEOs to constantly talk and share, and they would do that on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So this is the assessment for this section, and I just really want to quickly finish the last section and then see if you have any questions for me, and then just finish up. All right. The last one, let's go to the slide around. Let's go next, please. Keep going. One more. One more. Thank you. The last one is really about governance and leadership. If you end up creating a business model like this, and by the way, before I jump into this section, what I'm not suggesting you do suddenly, if you are a bank, I'm not suggesting that you suddenly change everything into this structure. What I'm suggesting is to say, our belief is think big, test small, fail fast, learn quick, right? So this structure can work if you have an opportunity to test it. So if you're in a bank, if you are a FMCG, if you are in the food business, the question, if you're in hospitality, what part of your organization could you use to test this structure and see how that operates so that you can move faster and get results quicker? Okay. To be able to make sure it happens, obviously you need governance and leadership, right? So we look at, have we designed and delivered practices around 6 governance mechanisms that works well in this type of environment? And I'll cover those very quickly. And do we have the individual leaders at the top and a shared leadership brand across the organization that can deliver that? So the leadership and the leadership brand fits very nicely into all of the work that we've been doing over all of these years. So next slide, please. So we look at 2 things, right? The governance and the leadership code. If you go to the next slide, please. Right? When we look at 6 governance mechanisms, what we tended to find is the organizations look at a few things. Number 1 is what type of culture. And they make sure culture comes alive. They don't talk culture only from PowerPoint slides. They make cultures real. Okay? And they create a culture that enables their strategy. They don't create a culture just to make people happy. Right? Let me say that again. They make a culture to support the execution of the strategy, not a culture just to make people feel happy within the organization. Right? The second one is collaboration. The third is around talent. Fourth is performance. Next is ideas. And the last one is information. If you go to the next slide. I'm only going to talk about this one quickly. The reality is this. What we tend to find is that companies think about culture very traditionally, okay? What we are saying is that culture really needs to be able to make your brand real to customers so that customers want to come to you and experience you and they want to buy from you. And culture also needs to make the brand real to employees. And it makes the brand real to employees because if employees believe in the brand and the culture enables them to deliver, what you have is you have an alignment between a brand that customers expect and a brand that employees behave and execute in a way that meets customer expectations. All right. So we need to be able to create that alignment around culture. And fundamental to that, if you go to the next slide, please, is this issue around leadership, right? Because you can't drive culture and you can't drive all of the other agile governance structures if you don't have the right type of leader. And what we discovered was, we have our leadership code model. When we worked with these 8 companies, we discovered a little bit of a change, right? And what we are moving now is leadership code 3.0. What we're seeing is that we need leaders to be business strategists. In addition to what we have, these are the other behaviors that people are looking at. In addition to personal proficiency that what we have, these are the other things that people are looking at. So I'm going to leave that with you because my fear for people is we invest so much in leadership, but we invest in developing people exactly the same because 60 to 70% of all leadership models are exactly the same. What you need to do as an organization, linking back to your strategy, linking back to your future trends, is what type of leadership do I need to be able to deliver the governance and the strategy that I need to have. Okay, Next slide, please. All right. Next slide. Right. So the governance and leadership assessment is the third part. I'll leave that for you. And the way moving forward, I won't cover this. And this is just the methodology. You will have it in your slides. Maybe jump one slide, just move one slide forward. Great. All I want to say is the easy way to do this is pull your leadership team together. Like I said, remember that one day, do a quick review of these three major areas. See where we are. Do this candidly, right? So that people can honestly give you their feedback. Identify gaps, link to your strategy, and then just build a way moving forward. We obviously have processes and systems that we can help you do all of this, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it if you need. But we are more interested in sharing. So 2 things. One is we're happy to send the deck to you. That's available. The second thing is we have created micro-learning modules around reinventing the organization. It will be available for free till November. It sits on a platform which you can download for free called Nobi, and you can go through all of the learnings on your mobile phones or tablet. I will give the information. He's more than welcome to send it to all of you, and feel free to go down a little bit more depth with what I've been talking about using your phone and exploring those concepts. We've embedded the videos in there. You should be able to see those things. So I hope that helps. Okay, I'm going to stop now and see if you have any questions.
Okay, Darryl, thank you. Excellent as usual. And then once again, I want to re-emphasize for all the audience that you will get the material, as Darryl mentioned, for free. You get a PDF of these presentations. We're gonna provide the link to you, or you can write us an email, put down some kind of message to us, and then we make sure that you get that link. And another thing that Darryl mentioned is there's a micro learning module that available for all. If you are interested to visit that learning site, also the link will be available for you as well. But let's me going back into the Darryl content and a couple of points that I think is really excellent. We just want to make sure that we know how to deal with that, right? First of all, I think that it's really interesting to see that what are you saying is, instead of very rigid hierarchical structures of the organizations, what you mentioned is perhaps it's time now for organizations to really look at their market, customer, and then try to break it down and trying to pilot that concept and trying to come up with a concept that you just mentioned about the sale, right? But question to you is, I think you know organization in Asia and then pretty much in Thailand as well. Sometimes the sense of control is really high in any kind of organization, I would say. That might work really well in the past. Question to you is, how can you share that sense of priorities and the need to rethink their organization structure? Because letting go of the power, letting go of the hierarchical, we all know really well that it's not easy.
Right. You raise a very good question, and let me share with you one thing. The Singapore government is a very strong and controlled hierarchy, right? Like most governments are. What they decided to do, at least in the technology space, was they ended up creating a small group, and they'd only started with 10 or 20 people, and they put them in a completely different organization. They put them in a completely different building, right? And they said to the leaders of the building, of this organization, your outcome is to deliver this. I'm going to let you operate whichever way you need to operate to be able to meet our technology needs. So this was a technology team, right? That team worked separately. So they didn't have to buy furniture the same way. They didn't have to follow the same performance appraisal system. They didn't have to follow the same structure. What the group did was they sat down, and it started with 10. They now have over 150 people. And they are the group that did all of our Trace Together apps for COVID. They do all of our data analytics when we can't figure out what was wrong with our trains and why did our trains keep breaking down. So what they did was they ended up trusting a small group. They tested it and they saw that it worked. And it worked better and better, and they kept investing in their group. They never tried to bring it back to the control structure. What they said is, look, if it works that way, we'll let it work that way, and we'll let it deliver the outcome. So my suggestion to Thai companies or to leaders that are comfortable with the traditional way of working is, I'm not suggesting you break up your company and operate completely differently. I'm suggesting that you test this concept. But when you test this concept, let it operate in the way that it can operate and see how it works and support that. Because if that concept is successful, it can help your organization because this team helped the whole country.
I see. Wow. That's also encouraging to hear, right? I mean, the new situation is require new thinking as well. And the new thinking is maybe, the willingness or a gut to try a new thing. That's really encouraging to hear, isn't it? Another question is, I think it's really important. I always like Dave Orridge's work on culture. I think his view is always really insightful and not just, like what you say, a culture to please people and feel happy and feel nice to each others. But the view that, culture is something that you need to merge between employee and customer, a point of view and expectation together. Which is lead into my question that I think many organizations still fall into that mistake as well, that I need to come up with the value that, hold our family together, bonding, family oriented. What do you see as a new COVID situation bring into any organization in terms of how can you identify the new culture or the new way of work, if you want to touch upon that point as well, that really merge employee and customer together? What is the process? What is the trend that you have been observed along the way, Darryl?
Right. So, first let me say that there's nothing wrong in wanting employees or the people within the organization to be happy and to be aligned. What we're saying is that you want them to be happy and aligned towards a purpose, and that purpose is executing the strategy. So what's critical is being able to link your culture and what your culture outcomes are to your strategy, and then tie it in with behaviors. Okay? When you have that, then people know what they need to do to be able to operate properly within the organization to deliver the outcome. What's interesting is when the culture is clear, people will decide, is this the organization for me or not? And it's the same when people are hiring, right? I want to join this type of culture. I cannot work in that type of culture. What we are seeing with COVID is this. We're seeing COVID and the impact of culture is organizations are now taking a relook at their strategy and how they're going to be operating moving forward. When people look at changing strategy and adjusting strategy, one of the dangerous things is assuming that the organization still has the capability to be able to pivot, right? And that the existing culture meets the new strategy. So organizations are now, what we're helping them to do is to say, my strategy is shifting and this is where I want to go. Now, let me take a quick look at, are my capabilities accurate? Are they still relevant rather? And can we build something that transforms us and helps us move towards that new outcome faster? Because of COVID, people are now saying, how can we go faster? How can we stay more connected, right? And how do we now work differently? So the second part around that is, how do we work differently? And, you know, despite all of us saying work from home and having flexibility is a good thing, many organizations had that policy but never allowed their staff to do it, right? COVID now forced everybody to do it. And many of the traditional leaders are going, oh, actually it does work. But many employees are now saying, I like to be at home, but I still need human interaction. Can I come back to the office? But what we're seeing is people saying, hey, I don't mind working in the office 3 days a week. Can you give me flexibility for 2 days? Because for those 2 days, I can deliver for you and I'll just work in a different way. So, you know, one of our clients started this process and, you know, in their mantra is, I can, you know, now we allow our employees to work anywhere, anytime, right? They no longer need an office. And I think that's great, you know.
I see. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, it seems like we gear towards like, you know, the hybrid model, isn't it? It's more like, okay, we now realize that work from home is work, but still people is crying for like, but I still want to meet my colleague as well, perhaps not your boss, but you know, that's turned to be like, okay, organization need to provide that option as well. I also see one of your slides, you mentioned agile, right? It seems like these days people talk a lot in terms of agile, but I want to hear from your point of view as well, from your experience, from your consulting engagement. What is the organization do it right and do it wrong when they trying to introduce the concept of agile into their organization?
Right. So the danger with agile is, so the idea is good and it works well when you apply it well. There's a bank that I work with that said, I'm going to go all agile, right? So I was working with a HR team and I said, what does all agile mean? And the worst part was they just took everybody and they put them into squads, they put them into tribes, they changed the designation, but the work never changed, right? It was a change in agile in name only. It was not a change in agile in terms of practice. It was not a change in agile in terms of behavior. It was not a change in agile in terms of culture, right? So I sat down with the HR team and I said, if you have no idea how agile is going to be actually impacting the organization, how are you going to help the rest of the organization be successful in this implementation?
I see.
Right? So I think when you use agile, there are advantages. You just need to be able to make sure that you're not doing it just because it's the next sexy thing to do. That when you do it, you're actually able to implement it and drive it across the organization. So one very simple example. Agile says, let's meet every morning. Let's have a standing meeting and let's decide what we'll be doing today, right? Agile wants everybody to be together, right? But that suddenly goes against some of the HR practices of saying, oh, but you have flexibility. You can work from home, right? Then how does that work with Agile? And sometimes people don't think through that, right? So it's just very simple, very simple things that I think organizations who want to go Agile need to go through it. It was so funny. The way we used to demonstrate agile when we work with clients was we make them run an agile simulation. Okay. And at the end of the simulation, we debrief each point. And at the end of that simulation, they actually stopped debriefing and we ended up having a workshop to actually look at the business and review all of their policies, because everything that they had was created for a traditional business. Yet they said, I've gone agile for 6 months already, and they haven't gone really agile.
I see. All right. So it's not another buzzword, right? What you say is you got to live and understand the essence of agile principle as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question from my side. I think similar question that I posed to Norm as well, since our platform name is Care for Thai Business, right? So I think we would love to hear your word of wisdom as well, in terms of caring or anything that you want to leave up with any audience, Thai entrepreneur or beyond Thailand as well. Any words, any encouragement you want to leave with the audience today, Darryl?
Thank you. I was thinking about this question when you first asked Norm, and I'm not going to answer it from a business perspective. I think COVID and the efforts of TLCA and what you're doing is demonstrating what I truly believe is critical for us, which is our ability to support and help one another. Right? During COVID, regardless of where you are, what's most important is your willingness or our willingness to come together and face challenges together as a group. Okay? And regardless of whether it's COVID or technology or whatever that we will be facing, doing it together with people that you care about, and doing it for the right reasons, I think is going to be something that's going to be very important for all of us, either as business leaders or just human beings. So my recommendation is have the humanity, look after one another, care for one another, so that we can beat this together as a species, but also as a bunch of leaders and humans.
All right. So with that, thank you so much for your time, Darryl. I think we have been listening to Darryl and very interesting point. Not just Darryl, but the ideas behind from RBL, meaning Dave, Origin, Nattavut, and a bunch of smart people behind as well. I think that it might be a time as well that we all need to rethink about the way our business is running in terms of organization, structures, ability to deliver the right cultures, not just for your employee to feel good, but what does it mean for customer in the end as well. And with that, I would once again thank you for Darryl encouragement, inspirations, words in the end as well. And he also modeled what he said by supporting our platform. And with that, thank you so much, Darren. Look forward to welcome you back to Bangkok. And I'm sure a lot of golf courses start missing you now.
สวัสดีครับ Thank you very much
สวัสดีครับ alright ครับ ขอบคุณครับ สวัสดีครับ อย่างที่เรียนนะครับว่าสไลด์ในวันนี้ที่ในเป็น format PDF นะครับแล้วก็ลิงก์ที่จะเข้าไปเรื่องของ micro learning module ของทางด้าน RBL เนี่ยเดี๋ยวเราก็จะเตรียมไว้ให้นะครับขอบคุณและสวัสดีครับ